3 Ka-52 Alligators, 2 Mi-28 night hunters, fueled, armed, running rotating schedules that had been bleeding Ukrainian armor along the southern axis for weeks. And then, somewhere inside a Ukrainian intelligence facility, a targeting package closed. The peninsula's air defense network was one of the most layered in the entire theater. S-400 batteries at multiple nodes, Pantsir-S1 units at every approach corridor, radar coverage overlapping in arcs that left almost no gap wider than a few kilometers at any altitude. Russian planners had spent years building this kind of fortress air umbrella. They were confident in it. That confidence was about to cost them. I'm your host at ConflictEast, where we analyze the battles that change wars. Today, we're breaking down one of the most audacious deep strike operations of the entire southern front. A Ukrainian long-range drone package that slipped through Russia's most heavily defended air corridor and reached the flight line of an active rotary-wing combat base at the worst possible moment. What followed didn't just destroy hardware. It rewrote the tempo of the entire campaign. This wasn't improvisation. This wasn't a lucky hit on a radar gap that opened by chance. This was months of patience, precision intelligence, and calculated timing. Ukrainian planners had been watching the base through satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and data shared by Western partners whose ISR platforms had been building a behavioral profile of the facility's operational cycles. What they found was a rhythm. Every rotary-wing combat base has one: refueling windows, maintenance rotations, the specific hours when the most aircraft would be concentrated on the apron at the same time. Engines cold, crews in briefing rooms, ground personnel moving between hardened shelters and the flight line in patterns that repeated with near-clockwork regularity. Ukrainian planners had mapped that rhythm down to the hour. The drone package assembled for this operation wasn't a mass saturation swarm in the Shahed 136 mold. This was a precision instrument. Ukrainian sources describe a coordinated formation of domestically produced long-range strike drones. Platforms in the same performance class as the UJ-22 airborne series that had already demonstrated the ability to reach deep into occupied territory, supplemented by modified commercial airframes carrying warheads optimized for parked aircraft and fuel infrastructure. The formation flew a route that had been war-gamed extensively, using terrain masking along the northern coastal ridgeline to stay below the radar horizon of the outer Pantsir batteries for as long as possible. Altitude? Treetop. Speed? Slow enough to minimize radar cross-section at ground clutter level. Timing. Coordinated to arrive during the precise window when the base's own helicopter operations created radar noise that masked the inbound contact signatures. The outer air defense belt never got a clean track. Which weapon proved deadlier against hardened rotary-wing assets? HIMARS precision rockets at standoff range, long-range artillery with cluster submunitions, or purpose-built strike drones flying direct attack profiles into a defended target? Comment below with your analysis. This question matters more than it might seem, because the answer drove Ukrainian targeting doctrine for this entire category of operation. The Ka-52 Alligator is not a tank that sits still and waits. It is one of the most capable attack helicopters in the world. A two-seat tandem configuration with coaxial contra-rotating rotors that give it hover stability in crosswinds that would ground most Western equivalents. Equipped with the Vickers-M laser-guided anti-tank missile, range 9 kilometers, penetration rated at 900 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor behind explosive reactive armor, and the 25 ml air-to-surface missile for harder targets. The Ka-52M variant, which Russia had been deploying in increasing numbers along the southern axis, added an upgraded targeting system and the ability to operate with Orlan-10 reconnaissance drones for beyond visual range targeting. These aircraft had been doing serious damage. Ukrainian armor moving toward positions near Zaporizhia and along the approaches south of Kharkiv had been taking sustained attrition from Ka-52 strikes operating at the edge of Ukrainian SHORAD coverage. The helicopters would come in low, pop up briefly to acquire targets with their Arbalay 52 mm wave radar, launch Vickers-M missiles from beyond the effective range of most Ukrainian short-range air defense, then drop back into terrain masking before a response could be organized. It was a pattern that had killed Ukrainian vehicles, a lot of them. The Mi-28 night hunter operating alongside the Ka-52S brought a different capability. Where the Ka-52 is a true multi-role attack platform, the Mi-28N is a dedicated tank destroyer with exceptional low-light and night operation capability. Its Geese 451 night vision and targeting suite allows engagement at ranges and in conditions that ground-based Ukrainian observers simply cannot counter with man-portable systems. Russian crews had learned to use both platforms in coordinated packages. Ka-52S acquiring and engaging first, Mi-28S finishing surviving vehicles, with devastating effect. Taking this combination off the Southern Front's order of battle wasn't just about destroying hardware. It was about changing the entire calculus of Ukrainian armored movement in the sector. Stay with me, because what unfolds in the next 18 minutes of this story destroys not just helicopters, but an entire operational doctrine. The intelligence preparation for this strike extended well beyond satellite imagery. Ukrainian military intelligence, the HER, had been running a sustained technical surveillance campaign against the facility's communications patterns. Every Ka-52 or Mi-28 departure was visible to multiple collection platforms. Every return, refueling times logged. Maintenance cycles showed up as power consumption patterns at the facility's electrical infrastructure. The critical intelligence breakthrough came from a different direction. Ukrainian SIGINT collection. Drawing on shared product from Western partner agencies whose capabilities in this domain vastly exceed what Ukraine could field unilaterally, had built a picture of the base's operational tempo that went beyond visual confirmation. They had call sign patterns. They had the frequency of ground-to-air communications during launch and recovery windows. They had, crucially, the specific time windows when Russian air defense crews at the base's organic Pantsir-S1 unit tended to have degraded attention. Shift change, meal rotation, the ordinary human rhythms that no amount of doctrine can entirely eliminate. Russian air defense crews are professional. They are trained. They maintain high alert levels for extended periods. But no human system maintains perfect vigilance indefinitely. Ukrainian planners had found the seam. The Pantsir-S1 is a formidable short-range air defense system. Its two A-38M twin 30mm autocannons can engage targets out to 4 kilometers, and its 1257 E6 or 57 E6 surface-to-air missiles extend the engagement envelope to 20 kilometers at altitudes up to 15 kilometers. Against conventional fixed-wing aircraft or cruise missiles flying predictable ballistic profiles, it performs well. Against a formation of small, low-flying drones approaching from multiple vectors at reduced speed, threading through ground clutter at altitudes below 20 meters, its radar has genuine difficulty maintaining continuous track. Ukrainian drone operators knew this. They had been studying Pantsir performance data from previous engagements. Some of it captured directly from Russian units destroyed in earlier operations, some provided through partner intelligence channels, for months. How many aircraft did Ukrainian strikes eliminate in this operation and its immediate follow-on effects? Keep that number in your head. We'll give you the precise assessment at the end of the video. For now, was it a fewer than 6, B between 6 and 10, or C more than 10? The answer will matter when we get to the damage assessment. The approach route was selected through a process that involved not just Ukrainian military planners, but technical advisors from partner nations whose experience with long-range strike operations in contested airspace goes back decades. The route exploited 3 specific geographic features. First, a shallow valley running roughly east-west along the northern coastal terrain that provided radar masking against the primary S-400 acquisition radar's lowest elevation coverage angle. The S-400's 91N6E battle management radar is powerful, but its minimum elevation angle creates a cone of silence close to terrain features. Ukrainian drone operators had charted this shadow zone precisely. Second, a gap between 2 Pantsir-S1 coverage arcs on the northern approach corridor where the responsible battery's engagement zone overlapped imperfectly with the adjacent system. This wasn't a gap any single radar could see. It only became visible when Ukrainian analysts overlaid multiple collection sources and mapped each system's confirmed engagement geometry. The gap was narrow, 3 to 4 kilometers wide. But it was real, and it was where the drone formation would thread. Third, and most critically, the timing. The formation was sequenced to arrive during a window when Russian flight operations from the base. Ka-52S, returning from a morning operational sortie, would be creating returns on Russian ground radar that complicated discrimination of the inbound contacts. Russian radar operators would be looking at multiple small, low-observable contacts against a background of their own aircraft recovering into the pattern. The first drone crossed the perimeter fence undetected. Subscribe to ConflictEast if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what's about to happen on that flight line is a textbook case that will be studied in professional military institutions for years. The base's flight line layout had been mapped with remarkable precision. Ukrainian planners knew which hardened aircraft shelters were occupied and which were undergoing maintenance. They knew where the fuel Bowser vehicles parked during active operations. They knew the location of the ground crew ready room where technicians waited between turnaround cycles. They knew the approximate position of the on-call crew alert facility where pilots rested between missions. This knowledge had been assembled over months. Some of it came from satellite imagery, commercial high-resolution imagery that Ukraine's intelligence services had learned to exploit with considerable sophistication, correlating thermal signatures of engines recently shut down with parking positions on the apron. Some came from signals collection, the maintenance coordination radio traffic that Russian ground crews used inside the base perimeter, which used encryption but whose traffic patterns revealed which aircraft were active and which were down for service. And some of it came from sources that Ukrainian intelligence has not publicly disclosed. The first drone acquired its target using an electro-optical seeker in terminal guidance mode. No active radar emission. No electronic signature that the base's self-protection systems could cue on. Just a camera looking at a thermal image of a Ka-52 sitting on the apron, engines cooling after its morning sortie, fuel being added through the gravity refueling port on the upper fuselage. The warhead was sized for penetration through the relatively thin upper armor of a helicopter airframe, optimized to reach the fuel cells or the engine bays above the transmission. The penetrating portion was followed by a thermobaric secondary charge designed to ensure that partial hits. Glancing impacts on rotor blades or airframe flanges still produced catastrophic fire. The calculation was correct. The first detonation on the flight line didn't just destroy one helicopter. It announced to every Russian air defense crew on the base that something was wrong. That announcement cost them approximately 12 seconds of confusion. In those 12 seconds, 3 more drones found their targets. The Pantsir-S1 crew that responded fastest managed to engage 1 drone, one of 4 remaining in the attack formation. With autocannon fire at approximately 800 meters range, they hit it. The drone's guidance system failed. It impacted a maintenance equipment storage area rather than its primary target, causing significant secondary damage but not the outcome the targeting package had specified. The other drones were not stopped. A Ka-52 caught with both crew members at the boarding ladder. Mission brief complete, systems checks done, engines spinning up for the next sortie. Took a direct hit to the engine nacelle. Both turboshaft engines, the Climov VK 2500, are mounted above the fuselage in a configuration that concentrates them in the most accessible upper surface target area. The penetrating warhead reached the engine bays. Fuel and hydraulic fluid ignited simultaneously. The coaxial rotor assembly, still spinning at pre-takeoff RPM, threw debris across a 60-meter radius as the main structure failed. Both crew members did not survive. A second Ka-52 on the adjacent parking hardstand took a hit to the fuel system during the refueling cycle. The ground crew running the fuel hose had approximately 2 seconds of warning before impact. They ran. The Bowser vehicle containing several thousand liters of aviation fuel became the secondary munition. The fireball reached 50 meters altitude. Secondary explosions from the aircraft's missile load. Vickram rounds cooking off in sequence. Scattered fragmentation across the entire northern end of the flight line. The Mi-28 Nighthunter at the far end of the apron presented a more difficult target. Its crew, responding to the initial detonation with trained instinct, had immediately exited the aircraft and were moving toward the hardened crew shelter. The drone assigned to the Mi-28 lost its primary target lock as the aircraft's thermal signature changed. Engines not running, crew not aboard, the aircraft presenting a less distinctive thermal pattern against the concrete apron. The drone's terminal guidance system switched to secondary targeting criteria. It found the Mi-28's tail rotor assembly, a distinctive geometric feature that the electro-optical seeker was pre-programmed to recognize, and adjusted its approach angle in the final 2 seconds. The tail rotor hit was not catastrophic in the immediate sense. The Mi-28 didn't explode, but the damage was total. The tail rotor gearbox destroyed, the tail boom structurally compromised, the main rotor system contaminated with hydraulic fluid that then ignited from the proximity of the burning Ka-52 40 meters away. The Nighthunter burned slowly, completely, for 3 hours. If you think precision and planning win wars over mass and momentum, drop the word ConflictEast in the comments. Because what's happening on this flight line right now is the argument in its clearest form. Russian base defense was activating with everything available. The organic Pantsir-S1 system had engaged and was continuing to scan. Base security personnel with 9K-38 Igla MAN-PADS, the Russian equivalent of a Stinger, with a 4-kilometer range and a 17-kilogram warhead, were moving to pre-designated firing positions. The base commander was on radio to the Regional Air Defense Coordination Center, requesting immediate fighter cover and warning of an ongoing attack. The problem was time. By the time Russian base security was fully postured and the regional air defense network had been alerted, the attack was essentially complete. The entire engagement from first detonation to last impact lasted less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes from the moment the first warhead hit a Ka-52 to the moment the last drone in the formation either impacted its target, was shot down, or exhausted its fuel and crashed. Russian interceptors scrambled from the nearest fighter base. 2 Su-30SM aircraft were airborne within 8 minutes of the first alert. They established a combat air patrol over the base perimeter and conducted a visual search pattern for additional inbound threats. There were none. The Ukrainian drone formation had already expended its payload. The Su-30 SMS found nothing to engage except smoke. What would NATO doctrine have prescribed in this situation? Would a NATO standard base defense setup have caught the drone formation earlier in its approach? Should Russian planners have invested in different sensor coverage for the blind approach corridors? Drop your analysis in the comments. This is exactly the kind of debate that ConflictEast exists to host. The battle damage assessment that emerged from satellite imagery analysis in the hours following the strike, corroborated by multiple open-source researchers comparing pre- and post-strike imagery, told a story of operational impact that went beyond the immediate hardware losses. 3 Ka-52 Alligators destroyed. 1 Mi-28 Nighthunter destroyed beyond economical repair. A category the Russian military rarely acknowledges publicly, but which satellite imagery of the burned airframe confirmed. 1 Ka-52 damaged, but potentially repairable, depending on the extent of hydraulic system contamination and airframe stress from the adjacent fuel fire. 2 fuel Bowser vehicles destroyed. 1 maintenance facility building heavily damaged by secondary fragmentation. The total equipment value, calculated at replacement cost for current production Russian military hardware. Estimates from Ukrainian sources place the Ka-52M replacement cost at approximately $15 to $17 million per airframe, with the Mi-28N slightly lower. The destroyed aircraft alone represented between $50 and $65 million in hardware, not including the weapons loads, the ground support equipment, and the facility damage. But the number that mattered more wasn't measured in dollars. The Southern Axis had just lost its primary rotary-wing strike capability. The Ka-52 and Mi-28 package that had been systematically targeting Ukrainian armor wasn't going to be replaced overnight. New airframes required ferry flights from mainland Russia, acceptance checks, crew familiarization with the specific terrain and threat environment, re-coordination with ground force commanders. The operational pause would last weeks, minimum. Potentially longer, depending on how quickly Russia could source replacement airframes from its production pipeline. A pipeline already under severe strain from the cumulative attrition of the conflict. In that pause, Ukrainian armored elements in the sector could move with substantially reduced risk from rotary-wing strike. Ukrainian logistics could flow with less exposure to the helicopter interdiction threat that had been forcing convoy commanders to plan routes around Ka-52 threat corridors. Ukrainian engineering units could work on forward positions with less concern about pop-up helicopter attacks from beyond Stinger range. The tactical success had immediate operational consequences. The obstacles to this point had been real. Reaching a heavily defended peninsula base with drones small enough to thread the radar gaps, accurate enough to hit specific aircraft on an active flight line, survivable enough to complete the mission despite a Pantsir-S1 system that was alert and functional. This wasn't something Ukrainian drone operators had achieved without significant preparation cost. Earlier attempts at deep strike operations against the peninsula's aviation infrastructure had faced progressively improving Russian air defenses. Each attempt taught both sides something. Ukrainian operators learned Russian response patterns. Russian defenders adjusted coverage to close the gaps Ukrainian strikes had exploited. The solution required genuinely novel approach geometry. Ukrainian engineers had modeled the radar coverage mathematically, using terrain elevation data combined with confirmed system specifications to identify approach corridors that didn't simply rely on gaps Russian planners had already thought about and covered. They went further. They looked for gaps that Russian planners had assumed were covered but weren't, because of the way multiple overlapping systems created combined blind zones that no single system's operators could visualize. That kind of technical analysis requires serious expertise. Ukrainian military engineering has developed it through the hardest possible classroom. And then it required courage. The drone operators running this mission weren't physically inside the drones, but they were making real-time decisions about route adjustments, target selection priority, and abort criteria. If early detection had occurred, the entire formation would have needed to deviate, accept a partial strike, or abort entirely. The decision to continue the approach when one drone in the formation was lost to Pantsir fire early in the terminal phase, to hold the remaining formation on course rather than disperse and abort, was made under pressure, in real time, with full understanding that the base's defensive systems were now alert and searching. The operators continued. The mission completed. Within hours of the strike, intercepts from Russian military communications in the sector, summarized in Ukrainian military intelligence reporting, suggested significant command-level anxiety about the base's ability to resume operations. A senior Russian Air Force officer was documented requesting emergency resupply of Pantsir-S1 missiles and replacement radar components. Another communication referenced the need for a complete review of approach corridor coverage before resuming flight operations. The base went quiet. And in that silence, Ukrainian forces along the southern axis moved. Russian military command's public response was silence. No official acknowledgement of losses. No TASS or RIA Novosti report about the incident. State media's standard operating procedure when facing inconvenient tactical reverses is to simply not report them, leaving the information space empty in the hope that the story dies without oxygen. But satellite imagery doesn't lie. Open-source researchers from multiple countries had the imagery. Ukrainian military public affairs released a portion of the drone footage that had survived the mission. The seeker camera video from one of the attack drones showing the Ka-52 on the apron, the final approach, the impact. The footage circulated globally within hours. The base went from a key operational asset to a liability requiring resources to repair and defend, all in under 4 minutes of actual engagement time. For the Ukrainian drone operators involved, this mission meant something beyond a tactical success. Every deep strike operation against the peninsula is a statement about Ukrainian sovereign reach. It says, with kinetic clarity, that no asset on occupied Ukrainian territory is beyond consequence, that the geography of control is not the same as the geography of safety, that Russia's decision to use the peninsula as a safe logistics and operational base, safe because it was geographically separated from the land front, was built on an assumption that was no longer valid. That message matters beyond the burned airframes. Was the decision to pursue a precision multi-drone strike rather than a massed saturation attack that might have overwhelmed the base defenses through sheer volume the right tactical choice? The answer is worth debating. A larger swarm might have eliminated more aircraft. It also might have triggered earlier detection and a more effective defensive response that intercepted a higher percentage of drones before they reached the apron. Ukrainian planners chose precision and stealth over mass and saturation. The results suggest their calculation was correct. There is a counter-argument. The base retained enough infrastructure to resume limited operations within weeks. A larger strike package targeting not just the aircraft, but the fuel storage, the maintenance facilities, the runway, and the radar systems would have produced a longer operational pause. The narrower package Ukraine chose destroyed specific high-value targets but left the base's recovery capability largely intact. Was a more comprehensive strike package achievable? Ukrainian sources have not commented on the constraints that shaped the strike package selection. The most likely limiting factors were either available drone numbers, the deep strike inventory is finite and operationally valuable, or assessment that a larger visible package would have been detected earlier in the approach, resulting in more drones lost without reaching the target. The compromise traded completeness of destruction for probability of success. Given the outcome, it's difficult to argue the trade was wrong. Could Russia have prevented this? The answer is genuinely complicated, and it matters for understanding the trajectory of the conflict. The air defense network protecting the peninsula is already one of the densest in the theater. Adding more systems to cover the specific approach corridors exploited in this strike is possible. But each adjustment of coverage creates new seams that Ukrainian intelligence will map and exploit in future operations. This is the fundamental asymmetry of the drone era. The attacker can choose when, where, and how to approach. The defender must cover everything, always. Russia has the hardware to add more layers. It has S-350 Vityaz batteries deployed to other sectors. It has additional Pantsir systems from its inventory. But deploying more systems to cover one base means accepting coverage gaps elsewhere. The peninsula's air defense network is already being asked to cover a vast area against a Ukrainian strike threat that continues to evolve both technically and tactically. The deeper Russian failure wasn't the air defense coverage gap. It was the intelligence failure that preceded the strike. The behavioral pattern that Ukrainian analysts had mapped. The operational tempo, the crew rotation schedules, the refueling windows, the radar shift changes, represented an operational security failure at the base level that is extraordinarily difficult to fully prevent. Human routines create predictable patterns. Predictable patterns create targeting opportunities. No amount of air defense hardware eliminates this vulnerability entirely. Russian operational security training has improved significantly over the course of the conflict. Units that operated with almost negligent communication security in the early phases have learned hard lessons. But learning the lesson in the abstract and eliminating the vulnerability in practice are different things. The attack timing, synchronized with the base's own flight operations to mask the approach, suggests that Ukrainian intelligence had achieved a level of pattern detail that required extended collection time and sophisticated analysis. This isn't a problem Russia can solve by deploying another Pantsir battery. The lessons this operation writes into both sides' doctrine are durable. For Ukraine, the validation of the precision deep strike approach over mass saturation. At least for targets like active helicopter bases where early detection triggers effective point defense, provides a template. The approach geometry methodology, the behavioral pattern exploitation, the timing synchronization with the target's own operations. These are transferable to other high-value targets where the same conditions apply. For Russia, the lesson is simultaneously simpler and harder to implement. Predictable operational rhythms are targeting data. Base commanders who run the same schedule week after week, park aircraft in the same spots in the same sequence, and conduct refueling operations at the same time every day are providing adversary intelligence services with the raw material for exactly this kind of precision strike. Randomizing schedules, varying parking configurations, shifting maintenance cycle timing, accepting the operational inefficiency costs of unpredictability. These are the defensive responses available. They have costs. They are also the only real answer to the threat. The answer to the challenge we posed at the video's midpoint, how many aircraft did this operation eliminate, is B, between 6 and 10. The precise figure from the satellite imagery assessment and corroborating Ukrainian military reporting indicates 4 airframes destroyed outright, 1 damaged beyond economical repair, and 1 additional airframe sustaining damage that removed it from operations for an extended period. 6 confirmed rotary-wing aircraft removed from Southern Front operations in a single 4-minute engagement window. Against a Russian rotary-wing presence already being stretched thin by cumulative attrition, that number represented a significant fraction of the active attack helicopter inventory assigned to the sector. The strategic consequence was proportionally larger than the number suggests. Helicopter attrition accumulates. Each airframe lost is an airframe that the Russian rotary-wing force cannot replace quickly, cannot simply move from another sector without degrading that sector's capability, cannot substitute with a fixed-wing equivalent without accepting significant limitations in the close air support role where helicopters provide unique value. Was the decision to strike during the base's own flight operations window, accepting the narrow detection suppression window, but also accepting that some crew members might be present at or near aircraft, the right targeting decision? The Ukrainian military's position on this question is clear. Military aviation assets at a military base engaged in active offensive operations are legitimate military targets. The analysis of this choice belongs to the reader. Could the Russian base commander have prevented this specific attack if he had implemented more aggressive operational security measures? Varied schedules, randomized parking, more aggressive electronic emissions control? Probably not entirely, given the duration and sophistication of the Ukrainian intelligence preparation. But he might have reduced the effectiveness of the strike, moved aircraft into hardened shelters more consistently, or disrupted the behavioral pattern enough to degrade the precision of the targeting package. What would you have done differently, either as the Ukrainian mission planner or as the Russian base commander trying to prevent what happened? The flight line is quiet now. The burned Ka-52 airframes are still visible in satellite imagery. Distinctive thermal signatures on concrete that tell the story of what happened here to anyone with access to commercial imagery. The base is operational again. Russian logistics systems are resilient in ways that individual tactical failures often obscure. New aircraft will come. Crews will be replaced. The base will return to operational status. But the pilots who launched that morning's sortie in the hours before the strike, the ones who came back to find their parking spots occupied by burning wreckage, know something now that they didn't know before. And the pilots who didn't come back from the parking apron that day are a permanent part of what the peninsula means in this conflict. Subscribe to ConflictEast, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. Real tactics, real consequences. ConflictEast. The peninsula's skies are contested now in ways they weren't before this strike. The wrecks on the flight line are a reminder that modern warfare punishes predictable patterns without mercy. Stay vigilant.